All right, I'm going to talk about art and philosophy. I was asked by someone to talk about this, and I told them I definitely had already planned to in my video on art and my model for art. If you saw that or didn't, or recall or don't, the issue for me is I take a pretty expansive view of art. I think that art is, as I said in my diagram, that art is, um, moving something mental into something material. And this obviously, is why I would say everything can be viewed as art. If somebody makes a desk, like Amazon, they said when Amazon was a startup, they used doors as desks. And, if somebody just throws together a desk, you could say, well, there wasn't much artistry in that. And they would go, well, yeah, because the point was not to make sure you could see my mental world. The point was more practical. We wanted something we could work on. You could still see it as art, but you also have a rich vocabulary and grammar for comparing the artistry. Someone that makes a desk, it could be a work of art if they really are realizing a vision. And that becomes in contrast to merely the practicality of, like, I would have just thrown the wood in a pile if it would have ended up as a desk. I wasn't trying to realize a vision in my head. Okay, now the relationship between philosophy and art, to me, relates to you have to understand something else about my position to get what I'm going to say about art and philosophy. Um, in We often have in concept space, you could put something in terms of another thing, or that other thing could be put in terms of the something. For example, light and dark. You can speak of light as an absence of darkness, or as darkness as an absence of light. And we do this all the time. We say, the room became dark, darkness fell, like darkness is the thing. Conceptually, you can't escape this. You can put light in terms of dark and dark in terms of light. In that case, you can escape it with the material study. You take dark and look what's in there, and you say, oh, look, it's light. Just very little of it. And you can get a fundament. There are definitely concepts that don't yield to this. For example, in math, you have a Cartesian, the regular square grid coordinate system, and you have a radial coordinate system. Those could be put in terms of each other, and there is no figuring out which is more fundamental. They can be transformed into another. Now, can that happen in materiality? Well, there's an interesting talk on the Stanford channel by a Professor Susskind, a physics professor, where he points out the sort of an end of reductionism. Because as we reduce things down to this quantum level, these quantum particles, suddenly we find out that when you reduce something, you're really transforming it. And at the bottom level, I like to say the whole universe is energy because it all fits in one sentence. But the fact is, whenever the energy exists in the world, it's in the form of some particle or field interaction, right? So it's always something else. Energy is a word we use to relate all of these things. Everything is energy, but it might be in the form of a photon or some other boson or a massive particle, or, and ultimately you can always break something down, but you're really transforming it. So I can break a photon down, and I can break an electron down, and really I'm just transforming it into another form. So what about art and philosophy? I have a pretty expansive view of philosophy too. Similar details, like a reliance on the concept of unintentional philosophy in order to make judgments and gradations and comparisons between philosophies. So, you know, I believe philosophy is about your worldview and how you act in the world. So, isn't that taking something mental into something material? Well, we have to think a little bit about what we mean by philosophy and make a distinction between philosophizing and philosophy. When we philosophize, even though I do believe the worldview, the thing we're working on when we do that work, is about living, we take something mental and put it into something also mental, right? And so it's art to the degree that mental things really are material. They're in your physical brain. But in terms of being the core idea of making something material, no, this is the distinction we're trying to get. It's not a perfect distinction because our mind is material, but it's this material, so we can make these distinctions. So I think that art is more fundamental than philosophy because of this issue, because philosophizing, doing philosophy, can keep things quite mental. You know, you don't have to write it down, you could just think and you're philosophizing. And so you don't have to do anything in the non-mental material world. So, then, if we go back to the fact that the philosophy is our worldview, it's an opinion on how to act and behave and how to justify action or discover actions in the real world. So, philosophy with respect to art becomes a fundamental part of art. It's something that you refer to. Art is when you're making your philosophy material.